Hi everyone, my name's Chris and I buy records. It's Friday the 1st of November 2021. It's been quite a while since I've made one of these. There's reasons behind that, but one that I want to talk about is simply the undeniable pressures that the cost of living crisis has affected certainly me, and I'm guessing many of you globally. Really, everything is so expensive, and unfortunately, the records that we love are also really expensive. I have always said that my aim on this channel is to talk about experience of the records I enjoy rather than the accumulation. However, the accumulation is quite a kind of easy way of engaging, firstly with new music, and secondly with my thoughts on that new music. It's quite a neat thing to kind of do, to have new sounds come into you. You can have new thoughts, you can do new pathways. When you're buying far less, you have far less of that exposure open to you. I have a collection of around about 1100 records, I would say, albums. I've got 50 to 70 singles. Don't listen to the singles an awful lot. I have about the same 12-inch. I don't listen to compilations an awful lot. So yeah, I've got around about 1100, which I think is a good sized collection that if I do have spells of not buying, I can go back and revisit and at times reappraise my thoughts on certain albums. There are kind of evergreen artists, if you like, that I would always go back to. I listen to Miles Davis quite a lot. I listen to Paul Simon quite a lot. I listen to Steely Dan quite a lot. But what I have been trying to do is engaging with more music channels, not even vinyl community channels, but music channels, to try and expand, not even expand, but to kind of look back on certain things. So a great example of this is following Andy Edwards' YouTube channel, not at all about vinyl. He talks about music, and through Andy Edwards I have reconnected my love of the band Yes, which might come as a surprise for people who kind of know me as a jazz and soul guy, which I understand. But I have been really enjoying Yes. Now, when I say Yes, what I mean is the albums between their debut in 1969 and then Close to the Edge in 1972. So it's not a huge swathe of Yes albums, but I think that the kind of the run of 1970 to 72 being the Yes album Fragile and Close to the Edge are really good, really strong, almost flawless. Yes are just a band who have too many records, basically. The quality unfortunately tails off for me quite significantly after those landmark records. But yeah, it's been quite nice doing that. But what I wanted to discuss is ways in which that I have found I can still engage with new music, which mainly comes from sacrifice. So one thing I've realised over the past couple of years, when I started collecting, it was just an absolute, as Philip Larkin would say, it was an absolute wrangle for the ring. It was just trying to buy whatever I could and just have the largest collection I wanted, just shelves filled with records. I thought that was what made it, good. And there are many that do that, and I think that there is genuine validity in that. The idea that there can be records in your racks that you have forgotten about that you can stumble across and then go back into and realise that it was something slightly different to what you had originally thought is actually a really rewarding experience. But then realised through, firstly, personal circumstance, which is not being able to buy the records I want to simply because of finances, and secondly, the very practical issue of space. I live in a 2 up, 2 down terraced Victorian house in a town centre in the Midlands in England. I don't have a huge amount of space to actually store the things. I have this Ikea CA, everyone will be aware of what a CA unit is. with quite a few cubes. I've got a 2x4 and I've stacked a one. Sorry, that's a four. Yeah, a 2x4, so 4 down, and I've stacked a 2x2 on top of it. I also have a 2x2 which has my setup on top of it. Also here I have another 2x2 which has compilations, 12-inch singles, and then my outgoing, which is what I'm going to come on to explain. So what I have started doing, which I'm actually quite happy with, is that I have simply started having a curated collection rather than an accumulated collection. So that is a fancy way of saying I regularly look through my records and I simply take out the ones that I no longer feel I either want to listen to or are relevant to where I am at this moment in time. So that's what I've been doing, and I go and I trade them. I don't bother selling them. I know that I could make vastly more money by selling them on the, but that's not how it works for me. My whole thing is I don't want to accumulate money. I only sort of part with records to accumulate more records that I think are more in line with what I have. So there's different categories for records that I will part with. One of them is just things that I bought because it was music I was into at the time, but I no longer listen to, and I haven't listened to in years. And to the extent where I can't name many of the records that I've actually parted with that fall into that category. An example being I parted with 2 albums by the White Stripes and 2 albums by Jack White. I was kind of interested in Jack White and the White Stripes 10 years ago. No disrespect to them, I'm not going to say that I'm better than that, my tastes have moved on. It's just that they were sat in racks and they didn't move. So the time came and it was just like, no, there are records that I want which I can't fit into the racks because these are here, so therefore these will go. I have also a couple of times traded some quite high value records that I know that I could replace easily enough. So a prime example of this is Kenny Burrell's Midnight Blue. So I had the great fortune of finding one locally some years ago on Music Matters Jazz. So basically Tone Poet, gatefold sleeve, Joe Harley, nice photos, lovely presentation and all that kind of stuff. Discogs median price at the time that I sold it was standing at around about £125 roughly. But that has recently been reissued on the Blue Note Classic Vinyl series. So to my mind, I can get a copy which, to be honest, to my ears and with my setup, I'm going to have virtually the same listening experience with that. I just don't get the fancy packaging. So the choice was made that I trade that to get other things, and then if I ever think, oh, you know, I missed that. And I've got to be honest, I know that it's a bit blasphemy for kind of lovers of jazz and lovers of Blue Note, but I was never that sold on Midnight Blue by Kenny Burrell. It's just something about it. I'm not that keen on that style of guitar. You know, I'm not massively into people like Grant Green or Wes Montgomery or anything like that. It's just something that didn't really resonate with me. So the choice was made to kind of part with that. Now, there are exceptions to this, and I just wanted to share a couple of these. So these are records that are relatively high value, but things that I won't trade for slightly different reasons. So the first one, I think, which should I go for first? Let's go for this. Okay, so this is Mingus RM. This is a first UK pressing on Philips from 1959. I bought this from the Record Album in Brighton in January of 2020. As you can see, it's got the Philips label, and this is in mono. Now, I have, as people will know who know me, I have the Mobile Fidelity one step of Mingus RM, and to be honest, it isn't even a contest with what sounds better. You can talk about authenticity of sound and perhaps even artist intention and everything about this. And this does sound great, don't get me wrong, but it's not even in the same league as how good the One Step sounds. The One Step is an absolute masterclass in extracting sounds from old master tape and putting them onto vinyl. It sounds exquisite. So why keep this? And the simple reason with this, and this is something I'm trying to get away with, but I'm allowing myself exceptions, is pure nostalgia. So Charles Mingus is an artist who I wanted to get into for the longest time and never quite knew where to start. Here in the UK, especially where I live, there's not an abundance of jazz records available. People where I live don't really buy a lot of jazz. The jazz sections in record shops are not particularly big. You just don't really get them. So Mingus was someone who I kind of knew was really, really important in the grand scheme of things. I also knew that he was an artist really without compare. You couldn't pigeonhole him into any of the other things. So in order to get a Mingus-like experience, you had to buy a Mingus record. But I managed to find this in a record shop in Brighton. It was more money than at the time I really spent on records, but I really wanted it, so I bought it. And that hasn't quite left me, and it's something that I still think about, and it's something that I simply enjoy owning. I very rarely put it on. I occasionally do, but it can't hold a candle to my more recent repress, which sounds, to be perfectly honest, it's probably the best sounding record in my entire collection. It's incredible. But I do love this, and I love the I love the Philips Regalia, which makes it look different from the Columbia that the US ones had. It's just a really nice album. So that's one that I was going to part with, and then realised I couldn't quite hand it over. The second one, which I'll show you, which is slightly different, is this. Now, people who kind of familiar with what this album is, there'll be a real obvious kind of, oh yeah, I see where you're coming from. So this album, now this is a repress, I can't remember the year, 2017 or something, 2017, from the Brazilian label Polisson. This is Milton Nendo, Lo Borges, Cub da Esquina. This is the most desirable of the Tropicalia albums of kind of Minas the Minas region in Brazil in kind of the early 1970s. Milton Nendo, absolute legend, appears on Paul Simon Records, is one of those people who is known quite widely outside of Brazil. Lo Borges, slightly less so, but still a really stellar singer-songwriter. The two of them formed together for this record, which is an absolute delight. So why did I consider selling it? Basically because this pressing isn't particularly good. It's not the best pressing. It's not the best sounding record in the world. So all of the Polisson records, they are pressed in Brazil. I can't remember if it's Sao Paulo or Rio, but they are pressed in Brazil. And as far as I'm aware, they're not digitized. I think that they do all come from tape. But that's not necessarily a good thing, because they simply don't have the technology or the mastering engineers that they have elsewhere in the world. So the vinyl is always pretty noisy. The mastering isn't as good as it could be. So then why not just get rid of it? Seriously, because I don't think that I will ever be able to replace this at an affordable price. If you look on Discogs, this is worth this. I bought this for 20 quid. I think it was on offer from the Mr. Bongo website maybe, but it was 20 quid. This is currently selling on Discogs for between 150 and 300 pounds. And this is a reissue. I dread to think what the original pressings are going for. But it's something that's not that widely available. It's not something that's been repressed recently, or better than this or anything like that. So this is something which I'm holding on to simply because it is a wonderful album, and I would rather have a copy of it than not. So that's another thing that I could, generate a fair bit of trade in value for, but don't. So what's the flip side? What's the flip side? The flip side is you get new music, which obviously is a good thing. But I found another interesting byproduct of this, which I want to share, and that is that it doesn't feel like real money, which I know sounds a little bit perverse, but it doesn't. It sounds like it's kind of, you're given a value of the stuff you've taken in, and then you basically you get that time to go and do it. And what I've been doing is I've been taking a lot more chances, and kind of judging things on covers a little bit more, judging things on, things that I'll be put off. So I've got no examples to show now because I couldn't actually find it. There's an album by a Japanese artist, which is on the, what's the label called? It's the Re Projects, whatever it's called. It's the ones with the pink obi. They're all Japanese imports. They are all quite pricey. And there's something that if I was using my own money, I wouldn't necessarily go for, but there's something I always kind of lust after, so I did buy that. The album is called Funky Stuff. I cannot remember the name of the artist. I'm really, really sorry. But that's one that I bought. It was kind of on the wall, and it was kind of, that's something I want, and there's nothing else I want to spend the value of these records on. So that was really good. But the big kind of discovery, if you like, for me, with this trading, which has been going on for, I don't know, since April time, maybe, has been my discovery of the Coal Mine label. So the Coal Mine label, who ostensibly put out, I think they put out kind of soul, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of gospel. They also have some Americana, which doesn't really interest me, but they do put that kind of thing out. But they're a beautiful label. I can't remember where they're out. I think they're out of Ohio. And they put really good hype labels onto their records, and they always talk about total transparency. So they talk about where the lacquers were cut, where the record was pressed, who mastered it. They put all of their records, I think, onto coloured vinyl, which initially put me off. I'm someone who has had not great experience with colour variants on vinyl, so I like vinyl black. But took a plunge. And without exception, on the ones that I have, all the Coal Mine records I've got they just fill me with delight, to the extent where I was going to pull them all out and I was going to display them all and say this is really good and here's why, but actually it would just be me almost repeating myself because all of them are at such higher standard. So I've pulled out two to show you. The first one is, bear with me, the first one is this, Step Down by the Surefire Soul Ensemble. This simply being because it was the first one. It was my first. The cover is, it's okay, but there's just something about it, and it's instrumental jazz funk, and it is absolutely wonderful. The sound of it is incredible. All Coal Mine records have a certain sound to them. I got a comment on Instagram about the Coal Mine sound, and they were saying that they didn't like the way they mixed the drums or whatever, but they appreciated that it was part of, the charm of the sound, which I agree with. But I absolutely love it. I love the fact that you can put one of these records on and it's got that Coal Mine sound to it. But this is brilliant. This is kind of what we got on here. We've got keyboard, saxophone, flute, bass, guitar, drums, trombone and mandolin, percussion, obviously percussion, tenor sax, trumpet and flute, congas, and then there's all sorts of stuff. This is just great. This is brilliant. So if you like things like Snarky Puppy, it's a little less jazzy than Snarky Puppy, but this is highly, highly recommended. But I think my absolute favourite of the Coal Mine records that I've bought, and I can't remember how many, but there's a few, is this. I absolutely love this. This is Drift by the Winston Brothers. I like the back as well. The back is slightly Twin Peaksy, I think. Anyway. The reason I bought this is because it has buzzwords, which I quite like. It was actually my wife, Kate, that found this, and it was advertised as basically soul funk from Germany, and I thought that's got to be a good thing. That's got to be a good thing. And on the whole, it is wonderful. But the absolute standout for me is the track Northern Light on this, which is, if you want a halfway divergent point between something extra, between Frank Wesley and the JBs and something like Can or Neu or maybe Kraftwerk, then that's it. It's got the rotary drumming, it's got that repetition, but it's also got that deep in the pocket groove, which we all love. I play this album quite a lot. I just think it's absolutely wonderful. So that's really, really highly recommended. I also want to just give a shout out to Kelly Finnegan's new album, of which I don't remember the name of because I'm rubbish. But that is also really good. That sort of vocal soul, and that's wonderful. But the big one for me, of things that I've kind of acquired new. So these aren't new records, as in they're not new releases. They're not 2024 or whatever. But I have fallen back in love with a band that I always kind of knew was one of my favourites, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. So, for those that don't know, I grew up in the town of Rugby in Warwickshire, which is kind of, it's a bit of a weird place geographically. It's basically on the border between Warwickshire and Northamptonshire, so it's going towards the east. But only up the road is Coventry, and then the urban conurbation of the West Midlands. So Rugby is a kind of a place where you get quite a lot of quite a big ethnic mix, and it's also got it's got a bit of a diverse feel about it. It's also a town that had very, very little going on, so you spent, as a kid and as a teenager, you spent most of your time away from that town and going to the big, exciting towns. My main one, when I was certainly quite young, or one of my main ones, was Coventry. Coventry, very, very important in my life. Coventry is a city that was bombed extensively during the war, in which case it was all built, all rebuilt in the 1950s and 60s. It has a very austere, concrete, brutalist feel to it. It used to be one of the most important historic cities that we had. A lot of medieval stuff that was just destroyed. The cathedral, which is fascinating, is one of my. It's that and Sagrada Familia in Barcelona are my two favourite churches or cathedrals in the world. Coventry kept the ruins of the bombed cathedral and built the modern cathedral by architect Basil Spence next to it. Walking round, I'm not religious, I don't hold any of those views, but there is something quite enriching in walking around it. It's also a place with a huge amount of cultural diversity. It was a place that was very industrialised. It was where the car industry at the time was very based in Coventry. Also a little bit in Birmingham, but in Coventry. Peugeot used to have a huge thing there. It's where Jaguars were made, Land Rovers, Talbot cars when they were a thing. So a lot of kind of immigration. I was born in June 1981, so a little bit too late. But the band that kind of sums up everything that I've been talking about is simply The Specials. What a band The Specials were. This debut, 1979, produced by Elvis Costello, is pretty flawless. I don't think there's many records that even go there. You can talk about the classics. You can talk about even London Calling by The Clash. I don't think quite has the magic that this record does. This is an album of manifesto that, if it did have a manifesto, it wouldn't work. This is the combination of Jerry Dammers and Terry Hall butting heads and then trying to reach some sort of compromise with the music they wanted to release. It is a stunning album. It really is. It's one that takes you on a proper journey. It's something that it gives you a vibrancy of a place and a time unlike anything. I adore the Clash's London Calling, and I love the diversity that's on that record, but I am aware that there is something a little bit more contrived on that because of the diverse mix of members of the Specials. This feels a lot more lived in. It feels a lot more from experience, and also Terry Hall's ability to write just painfully honest lyrics that fully represent both his feelings and wider society. That's why I believe that this is one of the single greatest records. Now, this is a record that I've owned for quite some time, but not this copy. And my recommendation, if you learn nothing from this, it is that the I guess it would be 40th anniversary editions of the albums I'm going to show, of this especially, which were half speed mastered at Abbey Road and are presented on 2 discs at 45 RPM. This is as good as a record of this age and in this style will sound. The record sound quality is immense. It's just incredible. A Message to You, Rudy, which opens things up. The first thing you're struck by is the absolute depth of the bass. The bass really rumbles through right at the bottom end of the scale. And then obviously the whacker guitars, they're quite high up in the mix. Yeah, great. Smiley face EQ, we're all aware of that. However, it's when the keys come in and they smack you right in that mid-range and you realise that you're actually listening to something really, really special. And it really just goes throughout. You can actually hear the little inflections in Terry Hall's voice when he sings, especially in That Doesn't Make It All Right. You can really hear his kind of plaintive thoughtfulness in his voice. And bearing in mind that this is kind of something which is designed to be played in groups with lots of noise and everything. What a great sounding record. Yeah, it was so good, in fact, that I kind of rushed out and acquired this. Now, this isn't quite as good. It's not quite as good an album. It doesn't have that it doesn't have that important feel to it. And also the sound just isn't quite as good. It wasn't recorded in quite the same way, but it's still engaging. It's still really, really, really fun. But if you're a bit hard up, or you just want, if you just want the absolute essential kind of crux of what the Specials were all about, get onto Juno or go into your local shop and just get this Ghost Town, the extended edition. Don't settle for the 40 for the 7-inch. Go for this. You want the extended trombone solo. Honestly, you do. What a thing this is. Not only because of Ghost Town, which, let's be honest, is the greatest single released in the past 45 years. Yeah, there's nothing which has surpassed Ghost Town. But not only that, on the B side, you have Friday Night, Saturday Morning, which you cannot ignore. Friday Night, Saturday Morning is... I grew up and had my into my early 20s, I grew up in this world. Friday Night, Saturday Morning, which is about people who are slightly unsure about themselves, going into their local towns and cities, going to nightclubs and getting drunk and coming home alone, is the life that people like me lived. And there is something so resonant about that. You know, I mean, just to read the lyrics. So it's by 2 o'clock. Sorry, but 2 o'clock has come again. It's time to leave this paradise. I hope the chip shop isn't closed because the pies are really nice. I'll eat them in the taxi queue, standing in someone else's spew. Wish I'd lipstick on my shirt instead of piss stains on my shoes. What a fucking line, or what a verse to kind of sum up what that is all about. My God, just unbelievable, unbelievable. So yeah, the specials, it has helped me reconnect. But yeah, those anniversary series, they've all got a black. Actually, I've got one here. They've all got this kind of Obi strip. Do remove that; it ruins the artwork on the album. But yeah, and I know that there's a lot of bad talk about kind of the half-speed mastering process at Abbey Road. I've never seen a problem with it, but the specials are special. Basically, I would go for those every time. So I'm not sure if that has been helpful or useful or just insightful, but that's been kind of how I've been keeping afloat with new and modern releases, or just buying, reissues of music I love. I don't believe I've spent an awful lot on records since I last did one of these videos, but I don't really feel like I'm missing out, so that's good. So I hope you're all doing well. It'd be great to hear if anyone has any similar kind of thoughts or feelings or anything like that. So yeah, please feel free to comment. Always up for discourse. I'm not particularly good at replying. I will try. But that's it from me. I hope you have a great rest of your day. My name's Chris at Oboe Records, and I'll see you soon.